Hello, and welcome to another episode of Across the Dinerverse, searching for the heart and soul of America, one diner at a time. I'm John Murphy, writer and producer on the TV series Innovation Nation, which airs Saturday mornings on CBS. And now I travel across the country, talking to people over bacon, sausage, bacon on top of sausage with a side of more bacon, about their lives, where they live, maybe some skeletons in the closet, and kind of how they feel about America. Everybody has a story, and some of them are inspiring, moving, or just flat out bonkers. But they reveal our collective humanity, and we can relate to so much of what they're saying. And that's what connects all of us. Speaking of connecting, I'd like to thank Jaden Parker, who called Dinerverse just extraordinary. On YouTube, he watches and listens to the show on YouTube. And also want to thank Judy and Jerry Novick from Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, who gave me some great diner recommendations in nearby New Jersey. The diner capital of America, by the way. More diners in New Jersey than any other state in the nation. They recommended Ponzio's in Cherry Hill, so we're going to have to make a plan to go there. And they also recommended the Lanarch Diner in Upper Darby, Pennsylvania. So Jerry and Judy, thank you so much for those recommendations, and we're going to come back east very, very soon. Now, this is a new podcast, so if you like it, please become a patron on my Patreon page at patreon.com/Dinerverse. That's patreon.com/Dinerverse. And for just a couple of bucks a month, you can see behind-the-scenes photos, get an on-air shout-out like this. Hello, Stuart in Las Vegas, Nevada, Chelsea in Oshkosh, Wisconsin, and Dylan in Seattle, Washington. Thank you all for your support, because it's my goal to do at least one podcast from a diner in all 50 states. So I appreciate the support. That's patreon.com/Dinerverse. Normally, the format of the podcast is I talk to the owner about the diner, the history, get some crazy stories, etc., and then I talk to the people who are there. This episode, it's a little different. We lean into science because I had a shoot on Innovation Nation in San Luis Obispo, California, home to California Polytechnic State University. So I had to shoot a story about haptic glove technology with a company called haptx. And you can check them out at haptx.com. That's HAPTX.com. And the correspondent I was working with was Alie Ward, self-proclaimed science nerd and host of the outrageously successful global podcast Ologies, which you can find at alieward.com. So I asked Alie to be a guest on the podcast after we shot the TV show, and she said, yeah, sure, I'll do it, of course. But I had to find a diner to go to do this, and guess what I found? And I'm not making this up, because we went there. A place called the Budget Cafe. Budget Cafe. I don't know about you, but it kind of hit me kind of weird. Why would anybody name a restaurant Budget? So I had to find out, and I went there and I talked to the owner, Rhonda. So Rhonda, first of all, thank you very much for letting me come into the Budget Cafe here in San Luis Obispo. I have to be honest with you, because when you think budget, you think of budget rent-a-car, budget, motel, budget, whatever. You never associate budget with a restaurant. It just doesn't seem to work very well. So Rhonda, tell me, why is this cafe called the Budget Cafe?
Well, it originally started affiliated next door to the Budget Motel. And so hence the name Budget Cafe.
So this was attached to a motel before?
Yes, it was. Yes, it was. And so when they lost the lease, next to the motel, then the previous owner moved it here into the Cypress Plaza strip mall.
Okay.
Yes.
Do you know if this Budget Motel had hourly rates? Was it one of those kind of motels?
No, it was not.
Okay. It was still a family motel that just offered a budget rate.
Yes,
okay.
yes.
Right.
And I often get customers that will say to me, well, it may be named Budget Cafe, but these are not budget prices.
I was going to ask you, with the inflation that's going on right now, are you able to offer a budget price?
No. I can't, because the prices have gone up so much right now. And so I have had to raise my prices between wages and product and everything else, So for me to survive, yes, I have to raise my prices in order to survive. Otherwise, I would have to close the doors.
And your clients are like kind of saying, you can't call this Budget Cafe anymore.
That is correct. Well, when I bought the place, my brother says, "Oh my God, what a terrible name! You have to change the name." And I said, "Oh, okay, I'll look into it." And I looked into it, and to change the sign was going to cost $6,000. And I said, "We're keeping the name."
How long have you owned the Budget Cafe?
I've been here 20 years.
Wow, that's a long run.
Yeah, survivor.
And what is your family heritage?
I'm Chinese.
Okay.
Second generation.
Have you always been in the restaurant business?
No, I'm a former teacher.
What made you pivot to owning a diner?
I taught middle school for 15 years, and when my husband retired, we moved to the Central Coast, and I started looking around for something else to do. And I found this restaurant.
Did your husband think you were nuts?
Yeah, no, he was very supportive.
Well, that's
very
good.
Supportive, yeah.
How have you enjoyed this 20-year run? You must love it because you're still doing it.
Yeah, it's been a lot of fun. There's been lots and lots of ups and downs, mostly ups, a few downs, but overall it's been great.
I'm sure the pandemic was hard.
It was very hard.
How did you stay afloat?
Well, as I tell all my young people, it's the reason why you have an emergency fund, and so that saved me.
Most diners of this size in smaller towns, the margins
are very thin.
Very
yes.
thin. And I've heard that most diners and small mom and pop cafes, they have enough cash on hand for about 2 or 3 weeks, and that's kind of about it.
Yeah.
Is that
correct.
true?
That is correct, yes.
But you had that emergency fund that kept you afloat.
Yes.
Tell me about San Luis Obispo. What is it about this community? What kind of community is it, and what's it known for?
Oh, it's a college town with Cal Poly here, but it's a very giving community, and people are very, very friendly. And here at my restaurant, I just have great people here that come.
You have regular?
I have regulars. Like, I have this regular guy, I won't tell you his name, but he'll come in with his newspaper and read, drink his coffee, and eat his breakfast.
Is he one of those guys that buys 1 cup of coffee and then occupies a booth for like 4 hours?
No. He's not like that at all. He just reads his paper and he'll be on his way. But before he leaves, he kind of looks around the restaurant and he tells the girls, and he points to one booth, and he'll pick up the tab for that particular person.
That's beautiful.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And they don't
trying
know
to
it.
pay. No, they don't know it. And he's just paying it forward.
What's this guy's name?
I shouldn't say, should I?
So you can make up a name. What name?
Okay, well, his name is Mark.
Well, Mark, wherever you are, thank you very much. What's the vibe here in San Luis Obispo? What are people into? What are they not into?
Oh, the vibe here is very relaxed. It's pretty low key. Lots of outdoor stuff going on here at all times. Lots of hikers and kids outside playing, and there's a lot of really great family vibes here in this town.
What's the wildest thing you've seen happen in this diner?
Oh my goodness, there's been some crazy things.
I want to hear it. Tell me a story. I want to hear a story.
Well, let's see. A few months ago, one of my guys was taking the trash out and said, "Rhonda, there's somebody out there." I'm like, "Okay, let me see." And there was a person outside undressing and changing clothes back by my dumpster.
Completely changing clothes.
Completely changing clothes.
Buck naked.
Buck naked.
Handsome guy?
It was a woman.
Handsome woman? Was this a homeless person?
Didn't look like it.
Just somebody who wanted to change by a dumpster behind the Budget Cafe for the hell of it.
Yes.
Sometimes
Go
things
figure.
just, yeah. What did you say to this person?
Oh no, I didn't go out there to approach that person.
You didn't hand them the menu or anything?
No. Didn't need that sale.
Do most people get along here?
Yes, everybody gets along here.
Very cool. Mm-hmm. What's the political vibe here in San Luis Obispo?
It's our policy to stay out of politics here in the restaurant, but generally speaking, I'd say that the town itself is pretty liberal.
Okay. Very smart, though. Do you have something on the door that says no politics allowed to be spoken inside the diner?
No, I just tell my girls to talk about their children, gardening, the weather, subjects that are, non-controversial.
What is the Budget Cafe, since you've been the owner, been known for? What do people come in here for?
Oh, just for our great breakfasts and lunch and good, solid American food.
I saw on the menu you have this Loco Moco.
Oh, yes.
And for people who don't know what that is, who may be listening in other parts of the country, what is Loco Moco?
Loco Moco is a Hawaiian dish where it's rice with brown gravy, a hamburger patty, and 2 eggs on top with grilled onions.
Sounds good to me.
Yeah, but when I started, I decided to run a few Asian specials. And so during the week, I'll make different Asian dishes, for lunch or breakfast if people want it.
So you're the owner and the chef?
I am.
You come up with the recipes?
Yes.
Which do you prefer more, running the diner or being back in the cook on the front lines and making the food?
They're both equally great. I mean, I like working with my guys in the back, and I like working with the girls here in the front. So, and then I get to kind of talk to customers when I'm out here, so that's pretty fun. Yeah.
Well, congratulations on the success. Glad you're still around.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you for letting me come into the cafe, and welcome to the Dinerverse.
Thank you so much.
Now, the plan was to go back to the Budget Cafe after Alie Ward and I were done shooting our feature story for Innovation Nation, but by the time we were finished, the Budget Cafe was closed. They close at 2 o'clock every day. So we had to make do with an echoey conference room at the location where we were shooting. Not acoustically perfect by any means, but I hope you do enjoy this great conversation with the one and only Alie Ward.
And just FYI, so Nicole ended up being a Category 1 hurricane. About 75 miles an hour is what it made landfall at, and it caused 11 deaths and $520 million in damages. And now, if a tropical storm develops in the North Atlantic or the North Pacific in the east, off the coast of the U.S. and Canada, and has sustained winds of 74 miles per hour or faster, we call it a hurricane. But if they form over the South Pacific and the Indian Ocean, they would like to go by cyclones, please. Well, then what are typhoons? This is a great question. I'm glad you asked. Those are the same thing, but they're over the Northwest Pacific off the coast of Asia. So we could do a whole episode on intraplanetary meteorology terminology. Trust me.
So, Alie Ward, we finally get to sit down together and be on a podcast.
I know. Normally, I'm on one side of the camera. You're on the other, and now we're both on the same side of the microphone.
I love it. We've worked together for 10 seasons on CBS's Innovation Nation. That's how we met.
Yes, indeed.
How do you start your podcast every week?
Oh, their pronouns. Yes. I started asking people what their pronouns were because someone tweeted at me, and they were like, my partner is non-binary, and it just helps when everyone says their pronouns because it's not as weird when my partner says, they, them. And so, they're like, that would really help to normalize it. And so I said, sure, let's do it. And very few people seem to get upset about it.
So you start your podcast with, what are your pronouns? I start my podcast, what's your story?
Yes, exactly. What's your deal?
So what is your deal?
My deal is my dad was in radio, and I never, ever wanted to be in radio. I remember listening to NPR and loving NPR. My dad was a news director for KGNR in Sacramento. And so we would listen to him on the radio. We'd grow up eating oatmeal and listening to my dad report the news. And I remember listening to NPR after college and thinking, I love NPR, but God, what a nightmare job. Producing radio, because your sound, you need all the sound bites, and you got to make sure people don't say and what if the audio quality is just a nightmare. I'd hate doing that. And then here I am 20 years later with
doing a huge podcast that is extremely successful. And it's what I'm really blown away by your podcast Ologies is the fact that it's so specific and so unapologetically fangirl to science.
Yep.
As you say, you want to make scientists rock stars.
That's the goal. Oh, and I just realized my pronouns are she, her. I forgot to mention that.
And my pronoun is it. Okay. So,
you go by that. Yeah. Them is fine. Whatever feels like you.
I think but what's amazing to me is that most people are intimidated by science because not everybody can be a scientist. But you've built a huge audience. I heard something like over 50 million downloads of your podcast.
No, we about doubled that since that figure came out.
All right, sound effects people, knock it off. Okay, let's crunch some numbers, shall we? 100 million downloads over about a 5-year period of time. That's how long Ologies has been around. So that's 60 months. And that works out to 1.67 million. Yeah, 1.67 million downloads per month. Wow. But it certainly didn't start out that way for Alie.
You know who I tried to sell it to? This is going to make you laugh. We were at the Emmys, you and I.
Yeah.
We just won an Emmy. We were fresh off the stage with our first Emmy. It was spring 2015. And Innovation Nation, the show that we've worked on for 10 seasons now, just got its first Emmy. And everyone, there was free Chardonnay. So everyone was a little giddy and wine drunk. And I thought, if I'm ever going to sell a TV show, it's going to be right now. I'm dressed to the nines. Let's do it. So I'm sitting next to Dan Solomon, who sold our show to CBS. And
he was the executive at Litton Entertainment at the time.
Mm-hmm. And I was like, hey, you know what? I got an idea for a show. It's called Ologies. It's a different ology every episode, or maybe a couple ologies per episode. What do you think? And he said, it's not a show. It'd never work. Well, if I cannot sell a show to people who are wine buzzed with an Emmy in our hand, I'm never going to sell the show.
On a show that you currently work with them on. Yeah.
I was like,
and they are the producers.
Yeah. And they were like, there's no show there. And I was like, all right, maybe not. And so, I couldn't sell it as a TV show. And I had been doing comedy podcasts. Like I had a comedy podcast for a couple of years. And I looked at the other science podcasts that I listened to, like Hidden Brain and Radio Lab, and everything like the show that we do, Innovation, is like kid safe for the most part. You know what I mean? Like not a lot of swear words. There's a little,
no edge to it.
Not a lot of
very
edge
educational, very academic.
Right. You could listen with your 6th graders and they could learn something too. And so I thought, well, how authentically, if I'm going to do a science podcast, how authentically should I show up? Because I swear like a truck driver, and I want to hear about like bird dicks and stuff. I'm like, what's really going on here, you know? And we don't get to hear that in, like.
Well, in any biology class in school.
Yeah, you don't get to hear a lot of the drama,
Yeah.
And so.
Because birds have dicks too.
Sure, some of them just have cloacas. It's a wild world out there. And I wanted to hear about it, but I didn't want to have to make it like very, very super classroom safe. And so I was like, okay, I'm just going to take a chance. If no one wants to buy this for TV, I'm just going to make my podcast as real, as authentically me as I can, and we'll see if 5 people listen. And so I made it, and it took me, from my first interviews, it took me almost a year to put up my first episode. I could not crack the code of how to make this podcast work because my interviews were like very serious with some people. There were terms that maybe I might know from being a science major, or I had no idea what they were talking about. And I was like, I didn't want to stop them to be like, what does that mean? And so I was really trying to figure out a format. And finally, I cracked the code when I did a transcript of an interview. And I ran it through an AI software for 10 cents a minute. And I had a 40-page, pretty roughly accurate, 90% accurate transcript. And then I could start to break it down and realize, okay, here's where we need a joke. Here's where we need an explanation. Here's a chunk we need to cut. And so once I could see it visually, then I could figure it out. But going back to my nightmare of producing audio, I was like, it's so hard when you're making a podcast when it's just words in the dark and you don't really know when did I say this? What should I cut? And so once I got a chance to approach it like an article, it helped me so much. And so then I made it.
And you started crafting, as you say, some comedy into it. Even when you supply information, you throw in quirky asides or a fun little anecdote or a swear word or something like that. That even makes this dry information kind of entertaining.
I'm trying to keep people's attention with it. And,
sure.
I think that the thing, that you said initially, like, a lot of people aren't maybe science people, but what we don't realize is like, if you like whiskey or crickets, or you like swimming at night, or if you have a crush on someone, like you're a science person, there's science in all of those things. There's science in everything from your watch to how you cook a casserole, because science is just how shit works. And so anything you love, anything you fear, there's great science behind it. And so reminding adults that, yes, they are science people. If you're curious, you're a science person. Like, science doesn't die in people when the standardized testing, and the college applications are done,
Right.
Yeah. But the way that it's delivered sometimes is so like homework. So I was trying to find a way around it, being like, I should listen to this podcast about whatever, I'm like, I wanted to make it so people hopefully wanted to. Like, they had a friend at the party who's like, I'll introduce you, around.
You make it accessible for people to go to parties and like act smart because they know stuff because they listen to your podcast.
I know. I feel like I have the amount of information that lets me bullshit about anything just confidently enough to know like some facts about things. But it's ended up doing the podcast. It's doing Ologies has given me this like breadth of information where, when I work on other science shows or whatever, I do have a background now. I'm like a generalist in a lot of different topics, like someone who should be running a bar trivia thing, somewhere, you know what I mean? Like,
by the way, just let me add another side note here, working with Alie Ward during, she has a very successful global podcast approaching 100 million downloads, which is unbelievable. But this is the girl that did a Cuervo Gold, a Cinco de Mayo live stream.
Yeah.
And I was like, wow.
Yeah. I used to be in the cooking channel world, and it was fun, but it was not authentically me. Like, you would think that I was just on the verge of liver failure with the amount of cocktails that I had to make and present, and I'm not that big a drinker, I like a margarita, but not for breakfast. And, so I was in that world and finding some success in it and whatever, but it didn't feel authentically me. And then I had this time in 2013 where I was working on a cooking show, and a cooking show of mine just debuted on Cooking Channel. I was in like a couple magazines, which was a big get. And everyone's like, what a life. You get to travel around and eat donuts, which my doctors did not like this at all. Like in my medical record, it's like advised patient to eat fewer carbohydrates. Like all I was doing is giving myself pre-diabetes. But so I was doing all that, but I was really miserable, and it didn't feel really me.
Your heart wasn't being served.
My heart wasn't.
Your spirit wasn't being served.
It wasn't. And I felt a little bit like a fraud. And I also felt like it wasn't my final destination. And my dad got diagnosed with cancer that year, and a rare form of blood cancer called multiple myeloma. And then a few months afterward, his brother died of the same kind of cancer, rare cancer. My boyfriend at the time and I broke up, and I was devastated. And so I was having a real low point in my life. And I was just, everyone around me seemed to be falling apart too. And so I went to the Museum of Natural History, and a friend of a friend said, hey, you want a tour? And I said, sure. And I went, she showed me the insect area where they breed and take care of live tarantulas and scorpions. And my heart burst. I was like in heaven,
Wow.
Just like letting millipedes crawl on me and looking at cockroaches and stuff. And I was like, this is what I miss. I was a science major and I loved bugs ever since I was a kid. And so she suggested I start volunteering there. And I was like, what do I have to offer? But I took an orientation, and every Wednesday morning, I got there at 8:00. You'd get a free coffee if you took the morning shift. You might get the North American Bison Hall or the Bug Hall or whatever. And I would just, for 3 hours a week, I'd stand there and talk to kids about coyotes. And I pointed a lot of people to the bathroom. That's really all they'd want from a docent. Just, where can I pee? I'm like, over there. Sometimes I'd pick up cigarette butts in the parking lot. That was my assignment. So it lifted my spirits in a way nothing else could have. And, it was like this dirty little secret I had that I was like, yeah, I have this life wearing cocktail dresses and drinking margaritas on camera, but what I really like is cockroaches. And which is like not my brand at the time. And
it's hard to find guys after a breakup by saying, what are you into? Cockroaches and bugs. Yeah. Listen, I'll call you sometime. I don't need your number right now. Don't even text it to me.
But let me tell you, when they're the one when they're looking for a girl like that, there are few and far between, But I was like, I started posting pictures on Wednesday mornings on my Instagram, and a guy that I had known 20 years before was like, hey, I'm editing a show and they're looking for a correspondent. It's a science show. And, I showed him your Instagram. You've been at the museum a while. And it was Andy Hall.
Who's the editor of our show.
Yes. And that is how I got the job on Innovation Nation.
Wow.
Is if I hadn't volunteered at the Science Museum, if I hadn't been so depressed that I was crying every day, like on a good day, I would cry maybe 5 times on a good day, a bad day, innumerable. And so it ended up opening this whole different life for me where I got to work on innovation, which, brought me into, Netflix shows and the Science Channel. And I formed a big group of great science nerd friends who inspired Ologies a lot, because I would sit around and listen to their field stories of, being in a hut in Peru and having to chase out a porcupine with a ukulele or whatever, and would wonder, why don't we get to hear these stories on documentaries and on NPR and stuff? And so that inspired kind of my angle of Ologies, of really getting to know the scientists behind the work.
And the best thing about it is on the show that we work on, Innovation Nation, it's so rewarding. It's so positive. Mm-hmm. The innovations are great. We're here in San Luis Obispo while we're recording this podcast. Uh-huh. We just did a thing with haptic glove technology where you're in the 3D space, and you're actually picking up with robotic hands, these things. It's just crazy. But the segment's only 3.5 to 4 minutes long.
Yeah.
And you got to jam almost all this information in such a short amount of time. Your program gives a breadth of an hour or more of these ologists to explain what they do, how they do it, tell stories, and we can be amazed and learn something at the same time.
Yeah, you can needle your guests about minutia that you couldn't get away with on TV.
On television.
And
no makeup. You don't need a hair and makeup.
That's the best part. No, like audio guys, hands down your shirt, which is just an inevitability of the job, but it's always an awkward moment in the morning when they're like, my hands are a little cold, and you're like, I got it.
I got it, yeah.
That's been really rewarding. But, when you came to me and said you were working on a podcast, I was like, how much time you got? Let's talk.
Yeah, I had this idea, and I asked you about doing this, and I pitched it to you, and you thought, well, there's some possibility here. Kind of threw out some working titles for the show, and Across the Diniverse is one that you thought was kind of interesting and liked. And so I do want to thank you very much for kind of helping me birth this little baby.
Very welcome. It's great. It's really, really well done. And that's the thing about radio and about podcasts is you do have a lot of room and time to really get into people's stories. And in, a short form TV segment, you might not be able to tell the whole story and give the whole context. And so with Ologies, the biggest lesson that I feel like I've learned from it is you're so much better off being authentically you, succeeding in whatever way you do. The success that I felt being who I was, even just if it was at the museum and telling someone where the bathroom was, that felt like more gratifying than getting a magazine spread, doing something that didn't feel like me,
Yeah.
And I've learned that kind of doing it is just always err on the side of authenticity. Just be yourself, and your people will stick around.
Right.
And so it's really gratifying to feel like when you're doing a job where you're not constantly one foot out the door.
Yeah.
And most of the jobs that I've done in the past, I've had a foot out the door. And when you have like a dream, or when you have a dream job, you feel like everyone must want that dream job. But that's not always the case. There are people who want to be in a rock band and be a singer. I would never want to do that. I would be terrible at that. And there are people who really want to be wildlife biologists, and they think everyone must want to do that. But a lot of people are like, no, I would like to learn about it, but I don't want to do it. And so I think a lot of times we think that the competition might be tougher than it is, because we assume everyone in the world wants to do what we're doing, no matter what it is. And so the biggest thing that's helped me is just really asking myself, like, what do I want to do? And what if I just went at it full force? Let's just pretend that it worked out. Let's just what would that be like if it worked out? And sometimes just that hope is what gets you through the failure. You're going to fail. And when you fail, let it teach you something and keep going. You're going to fuck up, and things are not going to go well all the time. Yeah. And a lot of times, we take those mess ups to be like, okay, you're in over your head. You need to get out. You can't do this.
Or ask for help.
Yeah.
From people who do know.
Yes. Yeah.
That's the key.
Yeah.
Because so many times pride gets in the way, and we're scared to look stupid. We're scared to look vulnerable because I don't have every answer to every question.
Pride and fear are so much more devastating than we give them credit for, you know?
Oh, my God.
And so many times we think we don't belong somewhere, and it turns out that we do. We just have to get through the pitfalls and let ourselves learn from mistakes. And I think that I thought this too about, because I've been told as a science correspondent, I've been told to my face, even after I was working on science TV. I mean, I think it was Discovery Channel once told me that, like, yeah, you know, we really like you, but our viewers just don't want to hear about science from a woman. So no, you know, just like straight up, like,
wow,
don't want you, wrong chromosomes, you know. But what I've learned is if you don't see yourself in a room, whether it's a writer's room or a lab or whatever, if there's not a lot of female directors or producers, like, you belong there more than anyone, you know, your voice is needed there more than anything. And so a lot of times if we don't see people that look like us doing something, we think we don't belong. And it's really kind of the opposite. Like, you can change that field, you know? And so I think I've learned that from innovation and from Ologies and stuff. It's emboldened me to just try things a little bit more and to not be so precious about failures, you know?
Yeah, of course. Embrace it.
Although making a podcast, as you now know,
it's hard.
I feel like I have a kindergartner aged podcast and you have an infant, and I'm like, it's fucking hard, isn't it?
It's really a lot of time consuming. But, you know, I will say I love every minute of it. But I want to get back to you. How did where did the seed get planted that Alie Ward is going to be a science nerd?
Oh, man. I grew up outside of Sacramento for the most part. I was born in San Francisco. My parents met in San Francisco, but my dad was in radio. We moved to Sacramento, Northern California. And back then, the town we lived in was cow fields. It was just pastures. And so right behind our house was just pastures literally as far as the eye could see, just rolling golden hills and oak trees and cow patties. And so we were very free range kids, and we would catch pollywogs. We were just like cage free. Just when we smelled rice-a-roni, we knew it was time to come back inside. Like, it would start getting dark. I mean, thank God we had tetanus shots, because I don't know what would happen. We were just, one of my favorite games to play was to take a clipboard and a stick, and I would poke cow patties and then try to guess how old the cow patty was by its crispness. And then I would log the data on a clipboard. I did nothing with it. I don't know why I did it. But so we were very feral kids. And so I always loved that. And then one Christmas, my Santas gave me a toy microscope that was maybe like $15. And it was a red Tasco brand microscope that came with some slides. And it blew my mind.
Of what you could see underneath a microscope.
Mm-hmm, what you could see. And I started looking at pond water, and I started... I'd find a dead fly on the windowsill, and immediately put its wing under, and then its mouth under, and then look at its foot. And then, I'd start asking my mom for Q-tips to swab the toilet to look at stuff like that.
Oh my God.
And just whatever I could. And I think my parents didn't expect that gift to be such a hit, but I was glued to it.
Yeah.
Like, I'm surprised I don't have one eye permanently half shut, because I was constantly like squinting one eye through this microscope. And so I loved it. And it really like opened me up to this world, like, oh, there's a secret backstage world that you can't see. So who knows what else is out there? Like, if this is what a fly really looks like what do the stars look like? Like, what's underneath the ocean? Like, what's in dirt? It's not just dirt. It's a whole life that we can't see. It's like this thriving, pulsing rave party. So I got really interested in that, and I really loved the natural world. And then I was really pulled between that and being kind of a ham, where I always wanted to go into TV and film and acting and comedy and stuff. So I didn't know which side to pursue, and I was really torn. And so I started college as an environmental science major, and then I was taking film classes on the side.
But wait a minute, you totally skipped over your goth period.
Oh,
I was goth.
Oh man,
You're the '80s goth girl.
I was a virgin goth girl that played a lot of Magic the Gathering. Like, what's not to love? Like, just like a bug collection, and like a box of dead bees in a jewelry box, and like black lipstick. Just like, wow, a charmer.
Yeah.
But I mean, that is That is one of the more pure versions of myself, where I think I just had this feeling where, my parents rented houses in a nice neighborhood because they had a good science and a good Latin department in the public free help high school. So we rented in this rich area when we were not wealthy. And so everyone else was wearing white jeans and a Benetton sweater and, gold Keds.
I haven't heard that name in years.
Right?
Benetton.
I remember one girl in my class, one of my classes, because I was like a new transfer student, she was like, "You've never heard of Benetton?" And I was like, "I don't know what it is." And so, yeah, we would shop at Goodwill, So, and I just was like, well, I'm not going to keep up with current trends, so I'm going to wear combat boots until they fall apart. And so it was a good way of just letting the world know, like, I'm opting out of this bullshit. Like, you can't judge, like, I'll let you prejudge me. And so, yeah, I was kind of, and I had a great group of girlfriends who were kind of all a little weird, and we're all still friends. I was texting them this morning. And so, yeah, I just loved like science and art, and I didn't know how to fuse it. And, so I kind of went away from science and went into art for, art and TV. And for me, I would pore over science books at home, and my walls were covered with bugs and insects and stuff, but I didn't do it professionally. I didn't.
You just did it for the love of it and just to be interested and connect to your creative soul. Yeah.
And I didn't really realize that I could fuse writing and performing and science all in one. So it's like, I didn't see a path for that. And then it was like, oh, it kind of just came cobbled together,
Yeah. I'm very curious. How many episodes of Ologies have you done? Do you know?
Almost 300, I think.
Okay. 300 episodes of Ologies, 100 million downloads. Congratulations on that. What do you think, based on all this information that you've taken in, podcasted out to the world, absorbed yourself, what should we be really, really concerned about?
In a word, climate.
Yeah.
Climate's pretty bad. Every scientist I talk to is like climate change.
And what about the people who say, nah, it's bullshit?
Oh, they don't believe in math, I guess. Like, it's numbers, it's just, you look at it, you plot on a graph, you look at numbers, you look at how fast the numbers are changing. And you look at what's causing that, which is carbon in the atmosphere. You look at where's the carbon coming from? It's coming from human sources. It's just irrefutable. And yeah, I think that I went on Bill Nye's podcast. I was his first guest, and I was so nervous. And he was talking to me, Bill Nye is very like, what's wrong with you people, which is.
Yeah, the Bill Nye, the science guy, he seems really nice on his TV shows, but he's very much a political activist, isn't he?
He's pissed. And I love that.
Yeah.
And, but he's like, how do you talk?
Bill Nye, the pissed off guy.
I know. He's like, I've earned being grouchy, and I've earned it. He's like, get off my charred and dried, dehydrated lawn, my drought-stricken lawn. But he, is like, how do you not get mad at people who are climate deniers, or delayers? And it's just like, I don't know. I mean, I think I approach it a little bit more emotionally, where it's like, people are not going to believe things that they're maybe scared of. There's a reason why people go into denial. There's a reason why our brains numb us from things that are too scary. And it's overwhelming. What could be more overwhelming? The only known life in the universe, us, your babies, your grandbabies, your dogs, everything that you've ever known and loved is at tremendous peril. People are scared, and also feeling like, what can I do? A lot of the people I've interviewed are like, voting is the best thing you can do. A lot of it is just, we're up against commerce. We're up against industry. We're up against
entrenched traditions
and
entrenched ways of doing business and commerce, as you mentioned.
Things don't change unless people by law are forced to change them. And so, those laws don't change until elected officials.
Or climate change starts affecting the super 1% wealthy people. Their yachts get sunken in hurricanes. Their beachfront property goes down in hurricanes. When the 1% starts really getting affected by climate change, then you'll see real action, because they're not going to put up with that.
Well, you know what the action is colonizing other planets. Like, that's the fail-safe. Not all of us can colonize another planet if our, great grandkids are in danger. So, I mean, that's the big one. And I think that's just, vote with the climate in mind is like the biggest advice that I get from climate scientists. And I interviewed one person who's a phenologist who is, studies seasonal changes, Libby Elwood. And she cried at the end of the podcast. I ask on every episode, like, what's the hardest thing about your job? And she's like, she started crying. She's like, I'm so sorry. I'm so emotional. I was like, please don't be. And she's like, it's just so hard to do your job when so many people tell you that the numbers that you're giving them they don't believe you, And she's like, it's so hard to try to be the bearer of news that people don't want to hear. And so I think, that's obviously the big one. And also just from a humanist standpoint, redistribution of resources, it is weird as a species to have some people have 12 yachts and other people not be able to pay for psychiatric medication. It's our consciences, I think, are better than that. So, there's those kinds of things. Voting is a really good thing to do.
Or maybe reading about science or listening to the Ologies podcast to become more informed and aware. Because there's stuff I listened to this meteorologist, this Dr. Shepard you had on recently. And I was like, wow, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
I didn't know. Cyclone bombs, what?
I know.
And the fact that the hotter the surface of the planet gets, it actually creates more moisture in the air, which creates these devastating hurricanes and snowstorms and thunder showers and tornadoes and everything else. I didn't know.
Yeah. And so talking to people who are climate scientists are just like, come on. They have 12 degrees. They work for NASA. They're like, fluid dynamics is so difficult. And then you've got someone who's just like, well, I don't know. It was cold in my neighborhood today, so climate change isn't real. And they're like, no, not all species can last forever, put it nicely. And 99.9% of species that have existed on planet Earth have gone extinct.
Including the dinosaurs. Who were, the T-Rex didn't make it.
Right. I mean, although birds are dinosaurs, and that's kind of exciting. Birds are legit dinosaurs. Isn't that exciting?
I didn't know that.
Every single bird is a dinosaur. Humans love to see themselves as the protagonist and the main character in the story. But really, we're just one of the many, many characters. And we don't know when we're going to get written off of this series, There's a lot of... I think this could be the Sharks show, and we're just a guest star. And I think a lot of people don't realize that. And so... we may not last as long as cockroaches.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Congratulations on your success of Ologies. You can find it at alieward.com or wherever you get your podcasts,
True.
right? Yeah.
True. Mm-hmm.
Congratulations on 10 seasons of Innovation Nation on CBS. There may be more. Who knows? Who knows? But a 10-year run on any TV show is a good run. And so we're both very blessed for that.
Yes.
And I'm so thankful and blessed that you gave me wonderful advice and some great ideas and suggestions, and most of all, your support and kindness in launching Across the Diniverse, and welcome to it.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be in the Diniverse. I love it here.
Remember when Alie mentioned that one of the reasons she went into a deep depression in 2013 was because of a breakup with her boyfriend? Well, guess what? They got back together. And guess what? They got married. All right, it's amazing. So, Alie and Jarrett, I wish you many happy years of happiness. As many as I've had with my wife, Dana, 31 and counting. So I did meet someone else back at the Budget Cafe who I thought was interesting, and if you love college football, and San Luis Obispo is a college town, just keep listening. Hello, sir. What is your first name?
My first name is John.
John, what is your story?
My story? Well, I've been coming to the Budget Cafe for over 50 years. When they were...
What?
Over 50 years.
So,
yes.
Now wait a second. So I guess you know Rhonda, the current owner.
Yes, I do.
She mentioned that this was attached to a budget motel. You were coming here when it was attached to this budget motel?
Yes.
What do you do? What's your story?
Well, my story is I know a lot of the people that come in here. I do know them. And being that I work college football, they've seen me on TV. They've seen me work.
What do you mean work college football? Doing what?
Well, I was a line judge.
A referee?
I was a referee, yes.
What division?
Division 1, the highest you can go.
You were a referee in Division 1 college football?
Yes, I was.
How many years did you do that?
28 years. And
you ever do the Rose Bowl?
Yes, I did.
What's it like being a referee in front of all those players and fans and the pressure? I mean, Division 1, football is bananas at that level, right?
Right.
What's it like being down there?
First of all, you have to have the respect. The coaches know who's working their games. and you have to have their respect because they won't mess with you. I remember one game I was working it was a bowl game, and Bobby Bowden, he was Florida State coach. It was a situation where he was ranting and raving and this and that, and the coaches said, "John, we don't understand him either."
And you said you were a line judge?
I was a line judge.
And what is a line judge's job?
Well, when the ball is snapped, you go to 17-yard span that you have, and you're responsible for forward progress. Forward progress is the name of the game.
So you call somebody's offsides, defensive or offensively.
Yeah.
You call holding calls.
Holding? Yep, I can call everything. Anything.
What is the most pressure-filled moment of a referee's job in a game?
Anytime the ball is snapped inside the 5-yard line. Like there was an Army-Navy game. There's the poor kid, for Navy, he fumbled on the 8-inch line. The ball came out.
Oh, no.
And Army got the ball.
Oh, no.
Yeah, that was terrible.
Especially with that rivalry.
I mean, he was crying. The poor guy, he was crying on the field, and it's tough. It's tough.
Would you say anything to somebody like that? Would you say it's okay? Would you pat him on the back, or you just got to keep that separation between the players and yourself?
Separation, yeah.
How does one get to that level? How do you even become a Division I referee, much less an NFL level referee? How does one get started on that track?
Well, I started at Cal Poly. I was working junior college football, and the first thing you know, I had this coach looking at me, and then another coach was looking at me, and I said, "Hey, this guy is better. He can work Division II and Division I, no problem at all." And that's how you have to have somebody looking at you, and maybe he knows some of the assigners, and go from there.
Were you ever approached by the NFL to referee?
I was, but the deal there, I was already older than 50 years, and they don't look at you past 50 years.
I see.
Yeah.
I see. So they were too late asking you.
They were too late, yeah.
Would you have taken the opportunity?
Well, sure I would have, yeah.
Do you make good money doing a referee job?
It pays very good, yeah, it does.
So you just work one day a week, a Saturday. Mm-hmm. You get paid for that day, then you get your travel expenses to wherever the location is.
Right, that's right.
Did you work just a specific area of the country?
Wherever my boss would send me, I would have to work. Yeah, I would work.
What do you think of the state of college football today?
The college football now, the conferences, they're trying to gather these teams in where they can make the almighty dollar.
Yes, sir. Some teams in a Pac-12 are now in the Big Ten. You know, there's this conference switching going down, and they're chasing payouts, aren't they?
Right. Yes, they are.
Being a former Division I college football referee, do you ever feel like carrying that little yellow flag in your pocket in life every day and start throwing flags at people for infractions in life? Like they cut you off in traffic or they bump into you on the street?
No, I just saw today, I was reading in the paper where jaywalking is now going to become legal, where you can jaywalk across the traffic. And
is that just here in San Luis Obispo or in California? Where is that law going into?
State law. It's going to be a state of California.
Of course it is.
The jaywalking is no longer.
But don't get me started on California because we both live here. I mean, they just laws don't matter. Yeah, laws don't matter. That's a different podcast. Yeah. Well, John, nice meeting you. Thank you for supporting the Budget Cafe for 50 years. My goodness.
Yeah. Yep.
Would you be upset if they were to ever change the name?
I don't think so. The good thing about it is it's right across from the DMV, Department of Motor Vehicles. It's right across the street.
Well, that's good. You can go get your driver's test and come over here and have breakfast. I love it. Okay. John, nice meeting you. Take care.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
That's a wrap on another episode of Across the Dynaverse. Thank you to Rhonda and everyone at Budget Cafe in San Luis Obispo. And a very special thanks to my guest, Alie Ward, host of the Ologies podcast, available wherever you get your podcasts, including alieward.com. I'm John Murphy, searching for the heart and soul of America, one diner at a time. What's your story?